Welcome to ThinkTech on OC16, Hawaii's weekly newscast on things that matter to tech and to Hawaii. I'm Duke Oishi.
And I'm Noe Na'au.
In our show this time, we'll cover a panel program at the William S. Richardson School of Law dealing with Hawaii's new medical marijuana law.
The program was called Green Rush Gold Standard, a conversation about Hawaii's cannabis frontier.
The sponsors for the program were ThinkTech Hawaii, the Health Law Policy Center, the William S. Richardson School of Law, the Hawaii Dispensary Alliance, and the Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii. And thanks to Representative Della Albilati for having set it up in the first place.
Our speakers were Jari Sugano, family caregiver, Marc Kruger, MD, Tyler Anthony, attorney and former regulator with the Illinois Medical Cannabis Pilot Program, Mitzi Vaughan, attorney and member of National Cannabis Bar Association and the National Cannabis Industry Association, and Hawaii State Senator Will Espero. The moderator was ThinkTech's own Jay Fidell.
Hawaii has been known as a liberal and progressive state, and now we are showing those characteristics again in the legislature this spring and at the William S. Richardson School of Law.
We had a medical marijuana law before, but it was incomplete. Now we have arguably completed it. But remember, it is still a medical marijuana law with all the relief and compassion that carries.
Hawaii is, of course, on the way to a recreational marijuana law, as in a growing number of states on the mainland, and everything we do is not only to perfect the way our medical marijuana law works, but will prepare us for the next chapter. We need to be mindful of that in every step we take, legally, socially, and scientifically.
Jari Sugano spoke from the perspective of a caregiver and parent of medical cannabis patient. She discussed the challenges of being caregiver, growing, testing, manufacturing, and administering medicine to a disabled child.
She's been utilizing marijuana since the age of 4 years old. We recently hit our 2-year anniversary, and she's been using medical marijuana for over 2 years. And we've had to overcome the learning curve in learning how to grow and process marijuana. And we've been able to do that through science and collaboration. I want to start off by showing you a slide, but I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to bring slides. So I wanted to just mention that the face of cannabis users in Hawaii is changing. If you had a slide before you, you would see a face of my daughter, MJ. You would see a face of a girl, Hannah, in Kauai. You would see Kuri in Kahala. And you would see a boy, Destin, in Kahuku. And there are children who are using marijuana here in Hawaii. I can also show you grandmas in Aiea and people in Kapilani right now with children who have cancer. And these are people who utilize marijuana as a medicine. So the people that you think are marijuana users, that face is changing, and we're here to advocate for Keiki to Kupuna and try to change the perception and what we were indoctrinated since childhood on what marijuana is. We grew up with a drug-free childhood. We were taught that marijuana was not something you want to be messing with. My mom always said, if you do drugs and I catch you, I'll throw you in jail myself. So it wasn't something that I thought I would ever be doing or sitting here today with a panel next to me. My daughter was born with a very rare condition, a very rare form of epilepsy. And for the first 4 years, we spent our lives in a hospital, in ambulances. She just had a blood draw today. She's in there with more senior citizens than most children have to endure in terms of blood draws and medical procedures. We just got out of Kapilani last week, and our lives are just embraced in this medical world. And by the age of 4, she had been through over 20 types of medications, and we realized if we didn't do something at that point, we were gonna lose her because she'd already been intubated several times. And we saw the life suck out of her, and we saw them bring her back to life, and we realized if we didn't do something, she would soon be gone from this world. So we were at the end of our road, and that's no place you want to be. We were on Facebook, and we realized that some of our friends were utilizing medical marijuana, and that news hit the national news when Jason David was on Discovery Channel for his use of marijuana and his partnership with Harborside. And our friends, the Figgies, were utilizing it for their daughter, Charlotte. They now have Charlotte's Web, and they were on CNN with Sanjay Gupta. And so the world was starting to see the power of Dravet children, and that's the condition that my daughter has, and how medical marijuana was helping her.
Dr. Marc Kruger spoke from the perspective of a doctor on the prospects for medical cannabis in Hawaii. He discussed the prospects of educating doctors, patients, and the public about cannabis as a medicine, educating a dispensary workforce, and potential medical research opportunities springing out of the use of medical marijuana.
Physicians behave in a very evidence-based manner, right? They employ medicines or interventions when they have been convinced that that medication or intervention is both safe and effective for the disease process they're treating or the symptom they're bringing this resource to bear upon. That is a very high bar to get over. To convince a physician that something is useful like that usually takes New England Journal of Medicine level research, prospective randomized controlled trials. Prospective, so we design the study so we're looking into the future. We already know the question that we're going to ask and answer, and we are going to design the study appropriately to answer that specific question, not looking retrospectively at things. Randomized, we're going to take a population of patients with this particular disease process or symptom and split them into two groups randomly. One group will receive the intervention and the other group will receive a placebo, and nobody knows which is which. We will then move forward with therapy and measure the outcome and compare the two. Prospective randomized controlled trials. Those are the kinds of things that convince a physician that an intervention is appropriate, safe, and effective. Now, that data pool for cannabis is lacking. So the question is, why? Why is that data pool lacking? And this is where the conversation turns more to a legal or policy or legislative kind of issue. Currently, if you want to do research using cannabis as a medical intervention, you have to obtain your medicine from a department called NIDA, N-I-D-A, the National Institute of Drug Abuse. This is an arm of the DEA, the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency. I'm sure everybody can immediately see the inherent conflict there. These federal departments are supposed to, by law, believe that cannabis is a Schedule I substance with no potential benefit and only harmful effects, yet this is who we're getting our medicine from to do research. When NIDA was conceptualized, it was years before it was actually funded. There was a building, an abandoned building, and a large agricultural field with nothing but overgrown grass, pun and double entendre completely intended. Nobody was even appointed to head the department and execute that. So for years, it went on like that. Currently, NIDA is funded. They do grow medicine. They are somewhat responsive to requests. I think that the issues that remain are, one, the inherent conflict, and two, what they grow as medicine is not really very useful for research purposes.
Tyler Anthony spoke from the perspective of an attorney and former regulator with the Illinois Medical Cannabis Pilot Program. He discussed the challenges of building a legal framework for products illegal under federal law and opportunities to collaborate and learn across multiple disciplines.
I graduated law school 2.5 years ago, and since then I've spent about 2 years practicing in one form or another, I guess, in the field of cannabis law. And I wish I could say that I went to law school to become a cannabis lawyer, but that is not true. It's like many in the industry, I sort of stumbled into it by happenstance. And this is probably, the legalization movement is probably one of the most interesting legal and policy experiments that I can think of in recent history. And I want to talk to you guys about a lot of the opportunities that there are for law students and some of the innovations that are out there in terms of getting into this industry. So one of the things that I think is interesting about cannabis law is it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's really an umbrella term for all different areas of law that are implicated by legal cannabis production, whether it's medical or recreational, whether it's involved in growing the plant, whether it's ancillary products or services related to the production. And it's creating a sort of a new generation, I think, of generalists. I think there's been a trend in the legal practice towards specialization, but for new lawyers coming into the industry, you sort of have to be kind of a jack of all trades, more or less. And just sort of a survey of the things that are involved. I mean, you're talking about venture capital and private equity. People need to raise money. You've got tax issues, especially with IRS Rule 280E, where businesses aren't allowed to deduct certain business expenses like utilities and rent and things like that. You've got environmental law, you've got real estate acquisitions, HIPAA and patient privacy, and constitutional law and preemption, intellectual property, securities, government contracts, software licensing, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And the message I have is there's room in the industry for any specialty. Really, it's anybody. Really, if you're any interest that you guys have, there is something in the cannabis industry that you can work on.
Mitzi Vaughan spoke from the perspective of an attorney with clients throughout the country and founding board member of the National Cannabis Bar Association and member of the National Cannabis Industry Association. She discussed agricultural innovations and new greenhouse lighting, nutrient growing, harvesting, and plant tracking systems.
Unlike Tyler, I did not graduate law school 2.5 years ago. I graduated 13.5 years ago. And my path has been a strange one, as it has been for many people in this industry. And I would echo what you said earlier about if you had asked me, I never would have thought. I think that's a refrain. And I think that what brings most of us here is the patients, or are the patients. It's also, for my firm and I, social justice. It's about incarcerating patients. It's about incarcerating people of color at rates enormously disproportionate to use of a substance that we are all, I think, coming along down the road in determining is actually incredibly medically beneficial and without question less dangerous than alcohol. So I always want to preface it with that, because as a business attorney, of course, then I start diving into business. But it's about the patients. So I want to follow on what Tyler talked about, because we are supposed to address innovation. And so I love Tyler's example of seed to sale tracking and how nitty gritty it gets down to every single gram or portion thereof is tracked through these systems, and it's really quite amazing. And it was necessary in order to essentially calm the federal government down about whether or not this product was going where it wasn't supposed to be. So there are other innovations also that are changing the face of this industry, and it is not only coming from within, but from without. It's a synergistic relationship between traditional agriculture and cannabis growers who used to have to grow in their basement. Well, we don't have to grow in basements anymore, right? We don't have to be, we can be energy efficient, because we can be out in the open and apply energy credits, make sure that we're integrating the use of the sun, which we just couldn't do before as a medical provider, because we were always afraid of that day when they came and they shut us all down. So what you have is not only bringing a gray market into the light, but bringing a gray market into a place where it can be more responsible socially, it can be more responsible from an energy consumption standpoint. It can maximize yields by working with people in traditional agriculture. For example, by, this is my pet love, is using trellises like grapes for cannabis so that it doesn't grow up, you grow out. Applying poinsettia growth technology. And that just begins the list. And those are traditional agricultural innovations that when you bring them into the cannabis industry, you get this beautiful marriage that provides safer and higher yield products for patients.
Senator Will Espero spoke from the perspective of a state senator who is Senate Vice President and Vice Chairman of the Senate Committee on Public Safety, Intergovernmental, and Military Affairs. He discussed the history of the law and the legislative changes that are likely to occur in medical and recreational marijuana laws going forward.
As you know, after 15 years, in 2000, the legislature did pass the medical marijuana law, we finally have a dispensary bill. And let me say that Senator Josh Green, who was the health chair at the time, was instrumental in making certain that that bill moved forward in its initial phase. He wasn't there at the end, but others were, and that's what's most important. But he certainly gets some credit. But if you look at HB 321, if all goes according to plan, the dispensaries could be operating July 15th, I believe, 2016. And that's 3 months after they are selected. 90 days. From my perspective, that's a short turnaround. I don't expect anyone to be 100% fully operational. If you look at 3,000 plants per grow site, but certainly there will probably, most likely, will be product available for others, and it's going to just be a slow ramp up, in my humble opinion. The law does state that the Department of Health has a lot of power and authority from now to January to come up with its rules, regulations, interim rules. And these interim rules will be in effect for basically 2 years. So when you look at HB 321, the obvious question is, will the bill need any tweaking? Will we need to make any changes, and or through the Department of Health interim rules, will those issues be addressed? And some of those issues that have come to me, I've been asked about, for example, is can you have a grow site side to side, right? As you know, we're going to have a vertical system at this time where one licensee will be able to produce, manufacture, and dispense. Retail site and a production site in the law cannot be side by side. One can argue why not, but at this stage, the law says they cannot be. The law is silent, though, on whether you could have two production centers side by side. One would think, just for the sake of cost savings and efficiencies, why couldn't you have two grow sites side by side? But again, whether we visit that or not, we'll see. As you know, it's not easy to pass legislation.
What will happen now under the new law? How will it work? How will the players comply with its terms? What are the risks and challenges? How will we meet them? The program was bristling with questions like this.
This is an important, if not transformational, time in Hawaii's legal history, and it's also a notable time in the development of what might be a new sector of our economy. On the one hand, an expansion of the medical sector, and on the other hand, the potential expansion of our tourism and recreational sector.
One thing is clear, we are in a new time and we have to see it that way. Not an extension of the rebelliousness of the 1960s, but a new and proud direction for our state. One that emphasizes our humanity and enhances our medicine, our lives, and our economy going forward. And now, let's take a look at our ThinkTech calendar of events going forward.
ThinkTech broadcasts its talk shows live on the internet from noon to 5 p.m. on weekday afternoons, and then we'd broadcast our earlier shows all night long. If you missed the show or want to replay or share any show, they're all archived on demand on YouTube.
Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our weekly calendar and our live stream and YouTube links. Or better yet, sign on to our email list and get the daily docket of our upcoming shows.
ThinkTech has a great new green screen studio at Pioneer Plaza. We invite you to come down, see our studio, and be part of our live audience. contact Jay at thinktechhawaii.com. Be a part of our civic engagement on ThinkTech.
Go ahead, give us a thumbs up on YouTube or send us a tweet at ThinkTechHI. We want to know what you're thinking and how you feel about current issues and events affecting Hawaii. We want you to stay in touch with us, and we want to stay in touch with you. Let's think together.
Check out our website for more information on upcoming 2016 Downtown Forum panels at the Anthology Theater in Bishop Square.
Join us and raise your awareness about the critical changes affecting and taking place in Hawaii.
And now, here's this week's ThinkTech commentary.
Let's talk about vampires. From ancient folk tales to Bram Stoker's Dracula, to Nosferatu to Twilight, the vampire has been done and overdone, repeatedly. Sometimes we're treated to a good story, but more often than not it seems that the concept gets watered down so much as to make us forget what made vampires frightening in the first place. There was a movie released in 2014 titled A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and it's been called the first Iranian vampire western ever made, and it probably is. I admit, I haven't seen the movie yet, but with a description like that, you can be sure that it's in my Netflix queue. When I saw that there was also a comic by the same name, I didn't hesitate to make the purchase. After all, it's always nice to check out the book before watching the movie. What I didn't realize is that the comic is not an adaptation of the movie, but rather it's a 2-issue prequel. It's written by the same creative mind behind the movie, a woman by the name of Anna Lily Amarpour, who has also written and directed a number of other smaller features. The artwork is by Michael DeWeese, and this comic appears to be his first published work. I need to put this fact up front and center. There's really no story here to speak of. It's a sort of character study, a vignette of sorts. I might even describe this as almost a visual poem. So if you need a story with a clear beginning, middle, and end, this might not be the comic for you. Now each issue features the same unnamed character, the eponymous girl who's walking home alone at night. Yet the tone of each issue is starkly different. One takes place along the streets and rooftops of an Iranian town, the other in the middle of the desert. One portrays the character as almost whimsical as she hops on a skateboard to travel across town. The other, she appears as a frightening, soulless horror, shuffling across the sands. At times we see her exhibit something of a conscience, sparing the life of a defenseless child, taking a moment to play with a stray cat, and intervening in an assault. She seems empowered and self-assured about her place in this world. At other times we see her act without mercy or remorse, killing with apparently no reason other than to feed. Here she seems lonely, desperate, and filled with self-loathing. These two portrayals are contradictory, but they aren't necessarily inconsistent. Instead, they're showing us two sides of the same coin, adding to the greater whole. People are walking contradictions after all, and the jolly persona we may project one day can be totally at odds with who we are when we're at our worst, like when we're under stress or when I haven't had my morning coffee. The artwork by DeWeese uses only solid black and white with no gray tones. This stark visual contrast highlights the disparity of her two realities, that of a young girl and that of a vampire. And where the text describes what's going on in her head, the art fills in the rest, showing us how unusual and how dreadful and unique such an existence would be, as she makes her way through her world. Even the title itself is an exercise in contradictions and contrasts. Let's take a moment to break it down. A girl walks home, alone, at night. Right there we've got innocence and warmth contracted against dread and foreboding. Now this is a decent comic. It does feel a little light, and I wish it offered more in terms of plot. However, the last page does seem to lead us right into the movie, so maybe I'll get what I'm seeking there. As a character study, this succeeds. As a work of horror, it's creepy, thoughtful, and unsettling. I can't say it offers anything new to the vampire mythos other than taking place in a novel setting, but it still works. Prequels can be a difficult thing to pull off. When done properly, they can enrich the backstory of the main piece of work. When done poorly, they just muddy the waters and provide unnecessary answers to questions you didn't even care about asking. And sometimes, just sometimes, it could be a nice standalone work of art that can be taken by itself, independent of the greater whole. The 2 issues of A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night fits into this category. I was intrigued by the character at its center, intrigued enough to want to know more about her and see what happens next. So in that respect, I guess I can say it's done a good job. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is published by Radco and is available in print and digital. The movie is on Netflix and other streaming services, as well as on Blu-ray and DVD. And if you're enjoying this detour into this realm of horror comics, stick around for my next segment where I'll discuss a comic series that redefines what has become another tired standby, The Witch. Thank you for watching The Thought Balloon on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm Richard Melendez. Until next time.
We'll be right back to wrap up this week's edition of ThinkTech, but first we want to thank our underwriters.
Okay, Noe, that wraps up this week's edition of ThinkTech. Remember, you can watch ThinkTech on OC16 several times every week. Can't get enough of it, just like Jay Fidell does. For additional times, check out OC16.tv.
For lots more ThinkTech videos and for underwriting and sponsorship opportunities on ThinkTech on OC16, visit thinktechhawaii.com. Be a guest or a volunteer, a producer or an intern, and help us reach and have an impact on Hawaii.
Thanks so much for being a part of our ThinkTech Ohana and for supporting our open discussion of tech, energy, diversification, and globalism in Hawaii. You can watch this show throughout the week and tune in next Sunday evening for our next important weekly episode. I'm Duke Oishi. Aloha, everyone.
I'm Noe Na'au. Aloha, everyone.